The Oscars 2024, the good, the bad, and the ugly, coming up right after this. Hey everyone, I'm Yoel and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So grateful to have you. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about the Oscars of 2024, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I did a video earlier about why I watched the Oscars as a guy, and hopefully I'll remember to link that in a card above. And you can watch that. And what's interesting is that I started watching the Oscars, and as I started watching it, I realized that I actually don't have the same affinity for watching it like I used to have. And that's okay. You know, it's okay to have a change of opinion, a change in perspective. With life, we're constantly evolving, and that doesn't mean that anybody who watches the Oscars has not evolved. But in terms of where I'm at in life, I definitely found that I didn't appreciate it in a way that I used to appreciate it. So I'm saying that for two reasons. One is because it is an important lesson that it's okay to own that. It's okay to realize that, you know, I may have stated one thing publicly pretty recently, only to have a different outlook pretty shortly thereafter. And that's totally okay. So I think that's a nice lesson in consciousness and being aware of that. And number two, it's sort of a caveat to this video that I'm going to do, because I have not watched the entire Oscars. So what I'm talking about in this video is based on relatively limited data. It's not like I watched the entire Oscars from start to finish, but there are some snippets from the show that I did see and that I thought merited some discussion. And I've broken it up into the good and the bad and the ugly, as I'm going to get into. So in terms of the good, what struck me, number one, is that I talked about actually in my last video about Jimmy Kimmel being a funny stand-up comic and obviously late night talk show host, regardless of political opinions. And actually the idea of regardless of politics is going to come up again a little later on in this video. But regardless of where you stand politically, because I do know that Jimmy Kimmel does get political, and obviously that alienates certainly one segment of the population. Regardless of his politics, I definitely find him to be humorous and to have some good one-liners and to do a good job generally in his stand-up before his shows. And in the Oscars, I found that he has a very challenging job because it's kind of like this minefield. He's got to work his way around, making sure not to be too offensive, to get too personal. And in a certain sense, I think he did a good job of that in his opening monologue. That said, it definitely kind of watered it down a bit in the sense that I did not find it to be rip-roaring hilarious. It was kind of tame. And I put this in the good category because I do find that overall he kind of stayed away from getting too political and getting too extreme. And really, that's not the right venue. And really, the Oscars is not the right venue for that anyways, okay? So I say good in the sense that he kind of stayed away from being too offensive. That said, there was one part where he kind of ribbed on Robert Downey Jr. a bit in terms of his past well-documented drug abuse. And Robert Downey Jr. obviously talks about that unabashedly. He doesn't shy away from that past of his. And obviously he's been able to achieve enormous success and go on from that to really do great things in the film industry. But I think it's a little different when Robert Downey Jr. himself says it about himself versus somebody else. So I did find that in that regard, and maybe some of you watching this will find this to be nitpicky. And obviously if you do, your comments and feedback are always welcome. You can leave that in the comment section below. But in general, I found that Kimmel kind of steered away from being too political, being too personal, and kind of kept it more even keel. And in that sense, I thought he did a good job, and it's not an easy one to do as well. And the other thing that struck me as being nice, and some of you may find this to be a bit fluffy, but Bradley Cooper, I noticed, had brought his mother to the Oscars, so did Ryan Gosling. And that's just a nice touch. You know, these guys could really choose to bring whoever they want. If Bradley Cooper wants to show up with any sort of date that he wants to bring, he could easily do that, but he chose to bring his mom. Ryan Gosling as well, obviously he could bring his wife. I think it's his wife or partner, Eva Mendes, if he wanted to do that. Instead, choosing to bring his mother, it's a nice way of showing recognition and giving thanks to them. Obviously, I'm assuming maybe by now it's not as much of a thrill that maybe it once was in the past for them. They're kind of used to their sons being major celebrities. But I'm sure it's still a thrill for them to attend the Oscars, and I just think it's a nice touch for a son or a daughter to bring a parent to the Oscars, just to show that gratitude and appreciation. I've talked about the idea of gratitude before. And that to me strikes me as a nice touch. And it's something I enjoyed watching while I was watching or whatever parts of the Oscars I was watching yesterday. So that's under the good label, if you will. Now, under the bad label, I don't like to use terminology of good and bad. You know, I'm doing videos on Michael Singer. Any of you who have been following my channel, and I'm grateful the subscriber list has jumped up tremendously. And thank you all who's watching this who have taken the time to subscribe. It really helps me out. And as I always say, it helps you as well to not miss future videos. And if there's anything you want me to talk about, feel free to leave that in the description. But in any case, I digress. I do talk about the idea of, you know, observing what transpires and not trying to label it with preferences, what's good, what's bad. So when I use the terminology bad, I kind of do that loosely, okay? So I wouldn't label it as bad per se, but something that I feel maybe it just did not sit with me in a way that it sat with me in the past. Now, where the Michael Singer teachings come in is that I can observe that. I can observe my mind feeling that way. I can notice it and be aware of it and stay in that witness consciousness, as I talk about in the videos. And there will be another Michael Singer video coming up soon, video 7. I'm in the midst of preparing that. But in any case, it is something that I noticed. And that's why I put it under this bad section, which is that I found that it was pretty over the top. So I was watching the introductions to the best supporting, I don't remember if it was best supporting actress or best actress in a motion picture. And I found it to be really over the top, laying it on thick, and the cameras zooming in on these actresses as people on stage are describing their work in their film. And I just found it to be very melodramatic and, frankly, for lack of a better word, cringy. Like, I was just cringing at it. It's okay for somebody to receive recognition. I talked about that in my last video on the Oscars about recognition, and it's nice to be recognized. But this, to me, kind of took it very extreme, the way they were describing their performances. You think they would have been, inventing a cure for cancer, the way they were going on about it. And I just felt that it was a bit over the top and extreme. And I cringed in a way that I hadn't cringed in the past when watching these awards shows. So, again, this is all about preferences, and I am aware of that it's just a personal preference that I have based on my own experiences and my conditioning and whatnot. But if it was up to me, I feel like they kind of could have, and really, quote unquote, should have toned down the fluff. Okay, it's one thing to have an award ceremony and for an actor to receive recognition, but at the same time, to kind of go over the top like they did, I just felt like it was a little too much, a little too self-congratulatory, a bit too fluffy. Okay, so that I put under the quote unquote the bad section. Now, this brings me to the last part of what I wanted to talk about, which is the ugly. Now, this has nothing to do with personal political opinions. As I said earlier on in this video, I steer away. I try to steer away generally from politics, and certainly in these videos, the point of this channel is not to be political in any way. And my thoughts now has nothing to do with what my personal views or beliefs may be. But I do feel that the Academy Awards should not be used as a platform to express political opinions, okay? And I'm referring to Jonathan Glazer's Oscar speech when he won for The Zone of Interest. I feel that using his platform at the Oscars to turn it into a speech about his views about what's going on in the Middle East was, frankly, completely inappropriate. Okay, I actually had this discussion recently. I don't believe the fact that somebody's a celebrity means that he or she has to be Muslim. If they want to express views on X, formerly known as Twitter, then I don't believe they should be muzzled, just like I don't think anybody should be muzzled. Then they have that right to do so. But the Oscars is about celebrating the art that somebody put together, and they're receiving recognition for that. So stick to that. Okay, it's not a place to start getting into politics, to start polarizing audiences, to start drawing into political discussions. In my view, this is a completely inappropriate venue. And again, based on, I'm very wary of talking about this because of what I read and learn and share with you in terms of the Singer teachings and consciousness. And you know what? that's part of just acceptance. Maybe I am kind of, sharing this with you based on my personal blockages and some scars, as I talk about in those videos. And, maybe this is just me kind of foisting my preferences onto you, the audience. But I really feel that way. I really feel that Jonathan Glazer should not have gotten into politics in his speech. And this has nothing to do with political views, what I think, what other people think. It's just a general comment that this is not the time and place for getting into political discussions. I'm sure a lot of you may disagree with me, and that's totally fine. And your comments and feedback are welcome as well. Okay, that's all in the name of dialogue, but that's something I felt. I also feel that his referencing his heritage, to use that as a kind of springboard to express his views, I also felt that to be inappropriate, okay? Because if he's going to express political opinions, he certainly should not be purporting to speak on behalf of any one culture or heritage or religion or anything of that nature. And by trying to do the very opposite of that, which is kind of sort of disowning his own, you have to listen to his speech to see what I'm talking about, but kind of disowning his heritage to express how they don't speak in his name, he was kind of speaking in the name of other people when he shouldn't have been doing it. So I feel like the whole point of his message was kind of undone by what he was doing. And frankly, if you ask me, I think that his speech was more about his own, speaking of samskaras, I'm curious what Michael Singer would say about this. I kind of feel like his speech had more to do with his own personal samskaras and his own personal experiences and conditioning, more so than it had to do with actually wanting to make a sort of statement or take a stand or anything like that. I think this was more about him personally. And that's another reason why I don't think the Oscars is a venue for that. His therapist may be a venue for that, or other good friends that he wants to express it to. Or if he wants to do a post on X, then go ahead, by all means. I'm a libertarian in that sense. But to use that platform, to use the Oscars, and to reference your heritage and try and make the very opposite point of what you're trying to do, to me, just really falls under the ugly category. Now, I hope you're not going to read that as a political statement, because again, I'm speaking very generally. It's regardless of what he would have said, one way or the other, one side of the spectrum or the other. My point isn't the content of what he said. My point is that he did say something, and I don't think it was appropriate to do that. And really, to me, that falls under the ugly. And anybody who speaks politically at the Oscars, frankly, to me, that speech would be part of the ugliness of the Oscars, if you will. It takes away from the art form and takes away from the experience of the show. Certainly those who are watching it for the Oscars, for the arts and entertainment, for appreciating that, not for getting into politics. So those are my reflections on the Oscars of 2024, my ideas of what I would call the good, quote unquote, the bad, quote unquote, and the ugly, quote unquote. I'm curious to know what you think. Do you have any comments about that? Do you have any feedback? Do you have any feedback on the Oscars generally? Do you have any feedback on what I had to share? It's always welcome, always curious to know what you, the viewer, are thinking. I'm always very grateful that you came to my channel, that you watched the video. For those who subscribe, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. For those who haven't, I would be very grateful if you did subscribe. It does help me, and it would also help you not miss a future video. And if there's any topics you'd like me to discuss, or any questions or comments, whether it's on this video or any other videos I have in my library, that is always welcome. Thank you so much, and until next time, I'm looking forward to seeing you at the next video. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that video. I've got plenty more in my videos library. If there's a topic you'd like me to discuss, feel free to leave that in the comments and I'll do my best to address it. If you can like the video, I'd be very grateful. As well, if you subscribed, you'd be helping me out. You'd also be helping yourself out to not miss a future video. Thanks so much. Have a great day.